Recent news has been pretty bad for Donald Trump between his ongoing disastrous economic mismanagement and things like whiskey leaks or Signalgate, which is when the Trump administration created the biggest national security breach in modern American history. And as a consequence of these things, Trump just got hit with a devastating new poll on basically every front that we have to talk about. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, again, pretty bad for Donald Trump. I just want to start with where he is in the aggregate. 538 is no longer with us. Rest in peace. So we turn to 538's controversial founder, Nate Silver. Nate Silver gets on my nerves for a lot of reasons, in that he's always on the Democrats' ass, no matter who's in charge, and he seems to grade Trump on a curve. But he is a celebrated poll analyst and poll aggregator, and he is basically the only game in town anymore. With that in mind, we look at his silver bulletin. He says Donald Trump's approval rating hasn't moved much over the past week. Last Saturday, 47.5% of Americans approved of the job he was doing and 49.6% disapproved. As of today, 47.4% approval and 49.6% disapprove. Why? The polls this week have been all over the place. Trump got some bad results from Ipsos, Morning Consult, and YouGov./Yahoo News. But as usual, he's well above water in Rasmussen and yesterday's RMG research. He also got a positive result in YouGov Economist. So it's been a mixed bag. But overall, he is still underwater by about 2 percentage points. So again, the shortest presidential honeymoon in modern American history. Now, before we get to this devastating new CBS YouGov poll, which just dropped, it's not in literally every instance, but in the vast majority of major areas, it's not good for Donald Trump. I want you to hear what Harry Enton, CNN's data analyst, has to say about Trump and the economy and why this could be the single biggest factor in his political ruin.
Number two is 14%. That's a nearly 30%. Let me just tell you, the economy and inflation is the whole kit and caboodle. As James Carville once said, it's the economy, stupid, but since I'm standing here with John Berman, it's the economy, smarty pants. Top issue facing America. Look at this. Number one, inflation in the economy at 43%. There ain't anything close to this, my friends. Political division, which comes in at number two, is 14%. That's a nearly 30-point gap. It's the only one that's over 15%. Donald Trump's presidency will ride or die on his ability to handle the inflation problem in this country and the economy.
So ride or die. How do Americans think he's doing on it?
Yeah. If you saw the cover page, I said, will the economy be Trump's Waterloo, to quote ABBA? Trump's net approval rating on the economy. Look at this. January of 2025, it was at plus 6 points. Look at where it's fallen to at this point, minus 14 points. That's not just the lowest of this term for Donald Trump. It's the lowest ever for Donald Trump when it comes to his net approval rating. It has fallen faster than his overall approval rating. At this point back in his first term, he was on the plus side of the ledger in double digits, plus 12 points. It has just fallen completely down. It has fallen through the floor, minus 14 points. This is a massive, huge, to use Donald Trump terminology, problem for his presidency.
All right, so they don't think he's doing well on it. Do voters at least think he's trying?
Yeah, this is, I think, the other big problem. They think Donald Trump's priorities are in other places. I mean, look at this. Think Trump is prioritizing these a lot. We talk about the economy. We talk 36% on the economy. We talk about inflation. It's below 30% who say that they think he is prioritizing inflation on a list of 8 that CBS News gave to voters, to Americans. Guess where the economy and inflation rank? 6th and 7th on an issue list of 8. They simply put, do not believe his mind is in the right place. He is not prioritizing the problem that they think is greatest right now to the American people. And that is why I said at the beginning, I could say that this might end up being Donald Trump's Waterloo because he is failing on the issue that's most important to Americans.
Yeah, it's really bad for Donald Trump. Obviously, I have no sympathy there. I mean, to the extent that because he's the president, his actions or inactions have disastrous consequences for the American people, including me and my loved ones. That sucks all the way around. But yeah, this is something that Democrats need to be ruthlessly exploiting. Not in a year, now, relentlessly, and every day between now and the midterm election, and then every day between the midterm election and the subsequent presidential election. Facts don't speak for themselves, Democrats, if you're watching. Please like and subscribe. So let's break down this recent polling. Disastrous for Donald Trump. Most Americans want Trump's focus more on prices, not tariffs. Most approve of his deportation efforts, which in and of itself is ominous. He's doing really well with both immigration and the draconian deportations that we've heard about. It says a lot about where the American people's spirit is. It's not in a really good place. We need to do some serious introspection. But the economy is more important to them, and Trump is getting failing remarks. After a week that brought tough economic news and polling showing American views on the economy are still sour, most say Trump is focused too much on tariffs, which they believe will end up raising prices. And they're right. They're right. And not enough on lowering prices. This has Americans collectively skeptical right now on the ability of Trump's policies to make them financially better off, a sentiment that was key to his success in the 2024 campaign. Yet that's balanced out for Trump today by continued majority approval on immigration and on his deportation program specifically. That comes especially, but not exclusively, from his Republican base, many of whom say that's just as important as the economy in their evaluations, which again is totally unhinged. Obviously, immigration is an important issue, whether we like it or not. Obviously, we have heard some disastrous anecdotes about some migrants in this country, although I think it's incredibly stupid, number one, and two, incredibly inhumane and callous to demonize migrants, documented or otherwise, as a consequence of these anecdotes. As a general trend, migrants, documented or undocumented, are much less likely to commit crime, but Republicans are demagoguing the hell out of this issue for effect. The economy is just consistently the biggest issue in the minds of most Americans. And Democrats, unfortunately, learned that the hard way because I think too often they think, oh, democracy. Well, in theory, yes, democracy should be more important because you can't have a functioning democracy in this country without a healthy economy and vice versa. But again, people are really concerned about their immediate issues, which is fair, except for Republicans who are also concerned about immigration, even though they very often are not directly impacted for it. I digress. The bottom line is, because of, not exclusively, but primarily because of the base coalescing around the issue of immigration, because they and Republican leaders have demagogued this, there's a bit of a balancing effect. But again, when you look at the economy in this poll, not good. Trump administration focusing on the economy. Trump administration focusing on lowering prices. People say not enough. 64% say Trump is not focusing enough on lowering prices. On putting tariffs, only 7% say he's focusing not enough on imposing tariffs. The right amount, only 31% say Trump is focused the right amount on lowering prices, and 38% say that he's focused the right amount on putting tariffs. Too much? Only 5% say that Trump is too much, excessively focused on lowering prices, and 55% say that he's too focused on putting tariffs. Again, not good news. From a list of items, most say the administration is focused too much on tariffs and, by contrast, is not focused enough on lowering prices. Trump won the 2024 election in large part on the economy and the idea that he'd make Americans financially better off. More importantly, he'd do it on day one. Don't let him wriggle out of this, okay? He set the standard. Not only are you responsible for the economy when you're in power, that's the standard that Republicans imposed on Democrats and President Biden. Oh, something bad happened economically, it's Joe Biden's fault. Yeah, well then by that standard, anything bad that happens in the economy because Donald Trump is president is Donald Trump's fault. But more importantly, Trump himself created the standard when he promised on the campaign trail, on day one, they're going to fall so fast, prices are going to drop, on day one, we're going to end inflation, and he hasn't done so. You are perfectly justified, and I would argue it would be foolish not to hold Donald Trump's standard or hold him to his standard, period. Just before he took office, a sizable 4 in 10 felt his policies as president would do just that. Asked about what's happening today, only a quarter of Americans say those policies are making them financially better off. Nearly twice as many say he's making their finances worse. Expectations versus now. Trump's policies are making you financially better off. In January, 42% expected that it would make them better off. Now only 23%, less than a quarter, say that his policies are making them better off. Worse off? Again, in January, 28%, a little more than a quarter. I think Trump's policies will make me worse off. Now, 42%, a plurality, say that his policies are making them worse off. The same? Only 30% in January felt that his policies would be about the same as President Biden's in terms of making them better or worse. Now, 35% say it. like an increasing number. And a comparison with Biden on the economy in terms of polling is disastrous for Trump. I think President Biden and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and the Federal Reserve under Jerome Powell, I think between the three of them, they navigated a brilliant economic recovery post-COVID. But that's not how the American people felt with respect to polling. So you being basically, a third of this country saying, yeah, it's about the same as Biden, that's not good for Trump. Even among Republicans, things have tempered. Just before he took office, 3/4 of Republicans said that Trump's policies as president would make them better off. And now, less than half of them say that's what's happening so far. Tariffs, or the threat of them, don't seem to be helping. Most oppose new tariffs, as they have for a while, and big numbers think that that'll lead to higher prices in the short term, which is true. The administration has argued that tariffs will have long-term benefits, but people are more inclined to think they'll raise prices rather than lower them in the long term, too. Tariffs on imported cars, in particular, aren't popular either. Impact of new tariffs on prices. Short term, 72% say it'll increase prices. 47% say long term. Again, nearly half. Decrease prices, only 5% say it will decrease prices in the short term. And 29% say it'll decrease prices in the long term. Again, not good. No impact, not sure. About 20%, 22%, 24%. So between a fifth and a quarter of the American people. But again, these are not good numbers for Trump. Importantly, though, Trump doesn't fully own the issue. President Biden still gets a little more blame for today's inflation rate than Trump does. But here's the thing. That gap is closing. See, Trump is desperate for his shit. This is Joe Biden's fault. And as of right now, if you held a proverbial gun to an American's head and said, okay, who's more responsible, Biden or Trump? Slightly more say Biden, which I would argue is ridiculous, but that's okay. That's okay because that gap is closing. 34% to 38% are blaming Trump's policies, and 19% say both equally, and 9% say neither. So Trump's on borrowed time here. And again, Democrats, their priority should be to close that gap. Close that gap. Hey, wait a minute. We were led to believe that no matter who was president, if something bad happened, it was Joe Biden's fault when he was president, right? That's what the Republicans said. Republicans said anything bad that happened on Joe Biden's watch was Joe Biden's fault. He should accrue a political price. Even if they couldn't draw a straight line between the policy and the result. He was president. He was the guy in charge. The buck stops there. Not only should that same standard apply, and so you need to enforce that standard ruthlessly and put that in the minds of people, you need to remind them about all those times Trump said, Biden's so stupid. On day one, I'll be able to solve it like this because I'm a special big boy. And use that standard against him. Democrats, get on it. People aren't going to just organically change their, well, some will. There will be some changing of the mind organically. But when you consider the propaganda machine that Democrats are up against, and they're going to be working overtime to blame Biden 2 years into the Trump administration, you need to be working overtime to say, no. Trump's president now. By his own standard, he's responsible, and he was the one who promised that he could get this done on day one. He hasn't. It's all his fault. Trump's approval for handling inflation specifically remains negative, and his rating on handling the economy in general has edged into negative territory since last month. That balances against net positive ratings for immigration, and he's even overall. So Trump's handling of immigration, 53% approve, 47% disapprove. So it's relatively close. The economy, 48% approve, 52% disapprove. Inflation, 44 to 56 disapproval. Not good. And in this particular poll, he's 50-50. Still a very short presidential honeymoon, even when in the aggregate, he's underwater. His overall approval rating has ticked down just a point from last month and is a few points lower than at the start of his term, though it remains above what he got at any point during his first term. His deportation program, that unfortunately is popular with Americans, which I suppose in theory that makes sense, but when you hear about the particulars, when you hear about the lack of due process, the disappearing of people, the predicate that some people are being deported, that's really dangerous, sketchy stuff. But here's where things also get back into bad territory for Trump. Americans overwhelmingly support the principle of judicial review of the legality of Trump's policies, including most Republicans. But there's also been calls from some to try to impeach federal judges who rule against Trump's policies, and that finds favor with the majority of Americans, especially those who identify as part of the MAGA movement. I'll probably talk about this too in another segment involving Jim Jordan, but should federal judges be allowed to review Trump's policies? 93% of Dems say should. 81% of independents say should. Only 56% of Republicans say should, but that's still a majority. And then in the reverse, 7, 19, 44% say no. Again, imagine this question were flipped. I imagine you'd see a lot of consistency even among Democrats, quite frankly, probably some movement into the should not, but relatively consistent. Republicans would flip on a dime. 93 would be a hell yeah, judges should be able to review Democrats, but if you're a Republican, you should you're above the law. What about impeaching federal judges? Well, only 19% of Democrats support impeaching federal judges who rule against Trump's policies. That's bewildering. Only 27% oppose from independents. 60%, 59% support impeaching judges who rule against Trump's policies. Because again, it's not about legal principle; it's about outcomes. And anyone who tells you otherwise is full of shit. The federal workforce and DOGE. Views on Trump's efforts to reduce the federal workforce are evenly split in the country. One reason is that most think the reductions will impact programs and services they care about. A slight majority think that Musk and DOGE have too much influence, with Republicans, again, standing differently than other Americans. 50% approve or disapprove his efforts to cut government agencies. Reducing federal workforce impact programs you care about. 85% say yes, it will impact. That's 62%. Again, a decisive majority of independents say yes, it'll impact. Only a third of, or nearly a third of Republicans say yes. Then you see the polls in the opposite. On the Signal scandal, 44% of plurality say it's very serious. The big national security breach that the Trump administration presided over. About a third of them, nearly a third of them, say somewhat serious, and only a quarter say not at all or not too serious. Using Signal messaging app to discuss military plans was appropriate, say 24%. 76% say not appropriate. So then this is not good at all, at least among the majority of Americans. Republicans, on the other hand, they're staying by their man. And we know if the shoe was on the other foot and you change the letter of the political party or the name associated with the politician, that would change. Again, bad polling on the Signal matter. Only 33% approve of taking control of Greenland, 67% disapprove. So, folks, this is where we are. This is really bad news for Donald Trump overall on on America's biggest priority, which is the economy, and on a whole host of other issues as well. Now, he has some disturbingly good news with respect to immigration, especially when you consider the legal and moral excesses of this deportation program, spearheaded by Tom Homan, the border czar. And Democrats also probably need to start attacking that too, or at least bringing up these instances where people have been disappeared or, cruelly ripped out of this country for the dumbest reason, despite having no criminal record. But that said, again, overall on balance, this is devastating for Trump, and Democrats need to exploit it to the best of their ability. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.